Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Snifford.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Are there any council comments or announcements? I'd like to start off by letting people know about a couple of things. Last week, we were very fortunate, several of us, myself, Bruce Williams, and Colleen Clay, to participate in a discussion on the Piney Branch pool. This was a meeting that was pulled together by George Leventhal, also from the County Council, who were there at the meeting to support the pool, were Valerie Irvin and Mark Elrich. It was a good meeting. There was a lot of staff, county staff there. One of the advantages of having a county council member pull the meeting together is we had several staff from the school system, staff from the ICB, the entity that leases out school space, staff from the county recreation department, all of those people that a county council member can pull together that members of the city council can't do. So it was very helpful to have 3 county council members involved in that discussion. And there is a lot of support. I would say there's complete support among the 3 members, those 3 members of the county council, for keeping the pool open. It's just a question of coming up with a plan that will convince the other members of the county council to fund such a proposal. And they charged several of the staff who were there with coming up with fleshing out some options that the members of the group put forward as to who would run the pool. And there's supposed to be an options paper coming back in about a month. And the next step would be to take it to a committee of the county council. I believe they were talking about a combination of the Fed and the committee that includes recreation. I can't remember which one it is. But it would be a joint committee meeting. And since there were participants in both the 2 committees they were talking about there at the meeting, there's some sense that they could be helpful in getting that to happen. So I thought it was a very positive meeting. There were some good steps forward made. This doesn't mean the pool is opening up next week, but I think it's on a track to have a longer-term solution to who would run the Piney Branch pool. I also wanted to congratulate all the volunteers and committee members who put on just a wonderful folk festival yesterday. They did a really good job with the weather. It was also, they did an excellent job also with the music, and it was very well organized. As always, I had the honor of assisting and emceeing the field stage. I was understudy for Mary Clift, who of course is well known and far better than I am at doing that kind of thing. But it was a lot of fun to be part of. It was a great day and wonderful weather and wonderful music, as they always do. And one of the things that we as a greater community should be very proud that we have people in our midst who are willing to put that much time and effort into organizing such a wonderful event. So I just wanted to note both of those things. And are there any other council members who have comments on anything? I saw Bruce and Carrie and Colleen. Doug, Joy. Okay.
And Ruben.
And Ruben.
Just 2 quick things. One, I wanted to make sure that people know about the Friends of Sligo Creek Sweep the Creek event, which is going to be Saturday, September 29th, rain or shine. It's going to, most sections of the creek, it's going to be from 9 to 11 in the morning, including the section from Piney Branch Road to Maple Avenue, but the section from Maple Avenue to New Hampshire Avenue is actually going to be from 10 to 12. And then the third section that's in the city, New Hampshire Avenue to Northwest Branch, is also going to be, like most of the other sections, 9 to 11. Then the other thing I just wanted to bring up was if the stand-in city manager could make a note that I noticed that at least 4 of the doors down in this lower hallway don't close. And I've always been aware of the one between the old lobby and the atrium that doesn't close, but it looks like a number of them don't close, and it's because they're leaning with their weight toward the latch jamb. And so I think it's an adjustment that needs to be made for the weight because of the weight of the doors, and it's a and it's just, it looks like it's going to happen to all the doors. So I don't know if that's a punch list item or how that gets treated, but it's getting worse.
Well, Mr. Siemens is getting a drink of water. Would you like to go on, Colleen?
Sure. It's hard to know where to begin. Let's see. Let's start with dogs. Just to make it clear to folks that there's no ordinance before the City Council right now about banning any kinds of dogs. What there is a discussion that's happening that started in the community, and I have made a request. Well, actually, I haven't made a request yet. I let the other City Council folks know that this was an emerging issue so that they could kind of check in with their folks about where their constituents are at. I'm not really sure where it's going to go, if it'll go to a work session or a public hearing or an ordinance, but right now where it's at is just people are talking about it and expressing themselves. So I wanted to put that out there. I've gotten a lot of feedback around the redevelopment isn't the right word, the planning activities around the Jackson Boyd playground. And there's a design out right now that is very centered around toddler and young kid use, and the park is primarily used right now. Well, actually, it's used by a wide range of folks, but there is a lot of teenagers that use the park, and they're somewhat unhappy that the program of the park has come out to be very young kid focused. So I think when you see the plans come before the council, that's also something that we're going to see is some of the younger folks there that we're going to see that as an issue. The swimming pool, I think that the meeting that happened with the county council and MCPS and the ICB, and we had a representative there from the PTA, went as well as it could have gone, and it's very hopeful. And it doesn't mean that we're going to get what we want out of the solution, but it's great to see that the different stakeholders are talking about it in what I think is a really practical way. They're being supportive, but it's not that kind of support where they say they support it one time and move on to something else. You can tell that they're really thinking about different ways that they could address this issue, and so I was really very happy to see that. And the last thing that I have to say is that I went to the Folk Festival, and I'm on the signage committee there. And part of being on the signage committee is that you hand letter all these signs, which you then save from year to year once you've done all the work. And I've been really impressed with Doug Barry's council comments where he brings in different flyers, and so I didn't want to be outdone. So I brought in a flyer today. And this is a flyer that was pasted on all of our hand-lettered signs with that kind of really sticky tape that when you tear it off, it ruins the signs. And so ruined most of our long-standing hand-lettered signs. As well, it was distributed all over the interior of the school. So this person essentially used the Folk Festival's access to the school then to paste the flyers all over the interior of the school, on school desks, in the little attendance pouch pockets that are out in front of each classroom, so that would have to be cleaned up. And then as you exited the festival, if you were really lucky, you got one of these on your windshield or folded up and slid into your car handle. So that's pretty aggressive flyering, but it creates a lot of trash all over the community afterwards, and I think maybe it's time to start talking about how we could address some of the more aggressive flyering issues that go on. And that's all.
Terry?
Thank you. Tom, that looks like a local real estate agent.
Well, actually, he's in Virginia. I called him right after I had just torn about the 5th hand-lettered sign, and I was really angry. And he said that he actually didn't do it, that it's the person who owns the house that did it. And they set it up so they've got a festival schedule on the back side, so it looks like it's an official festival document, and they're offering flex car tours to go over to see the house. They'd give you a free ride if you called them on the cell phone. They really work the system pretty well. But it's really the aggressive flyering that is really problematic.
Okay, so that's a house we don't want to buy then?
Well, I don't know if you want to buy the house or not. It might be a really nice house.
I just want to take a minute and congratulate the Tacoma Park Community Action Group for another successful, their second annual Culture Fair on Maple Avenue on Saturday. A lot of kids there. I also want to take a minute and thank Mario and the Housing Department for coming out and talking with residents there and working on getting information out about tenants' rights. Appreciate that, Mario. Thank you. And that's all. Doug?
Thank you, sir. Mayor, everyone, tonight's quiz. Is it a violation of the city code for a house or an apartment to have a broken external window? Yes. Correct. The answer is yes. It is a violation of the code. And if you see a broken window, external window on a house, basement, or apartment house, make sure you call the code enforcement folks at the city. They will go out and they will issue a very nicely, pleasantly worded warning, and if the owner or landlord does not repair that window, then it will be followed by a not-so-nice citation. And the reason we don't want to perpetuate these broken windows is because they certainly contribute to the shabby aesthetic of the neighborhood, and they do tend to attract unwholesome individuals who will do even more unwholesome things. And so we definitely want to keep the properties looking as nice as possible. And it's incumbent on you, if you see something that's ugly, and you know it is, and it bothers you because you walk past it and there's something about it that is disturbing to you, then by all means call. You don't have to go on record. Your complaint will be anonymous, and it will be formally entered into the system by somebody else, your council member, for example, who doesn't seem to mind, for the most part, doing unpopular things and shouldn't. And so that's tonight's quiz, Beautifying Tacoma Park. A couple of other quick things. I was asked at the Folk Festival yesterday if I would bring up before the council the issue of the vending machines here in the community center. The person pointed out, quite rightly so, that Tacoma Park ought to be a good example of providing alternative healthy snacks through these machines, making water available instead of sugared up sodas. And so I would ask the acting city manager if we could find out a couple of things. One, what kind of revenue do we get out of those machines? And two, what the most popular items are. I suspect they're things that we may not want to eat in huge quantities ourselves, although there is a little box back here with some things that are of questionable nutritional value. But I think this person is right, and we certainly should, as a city, demonstrate a positive attitude towards healthful snacking. And therefore, we should provide those alternatives through those machines if we can. And I know if we get a lot of criticism here for each of us taking our turn thanking the same person for the same thing, but I'm going to ignore those criticisms tonight and say what a terrific job I thought everybody did at yesterday's Folk Festival. Amazing numbers of people came, many of them from outside of Tacoma Park, and they had such complimentary things to say about the entire day, how it was organized, the quality of the entertainment, of the food, of all the booths that they visited. Just outstanding job on the part of everybody, and it was just an amazing experience and a terrific job.
Thank you. I do want to bring to people's attention the agenda item on next week's council agenda, which is a public hearing on the metro development. And this is something the mayor placed on the agenda. We're definitely in a timely manner, given that the WMATA board will be reviewing the staff report, which has now been submitted for public comment. There's a couple of efforts that I'm aware of. There's a residents group that are sending postcards to elected officials. I hope that people will make their views known, both in D.C. and in Maryland. And OTBA, our business association, has a statement of criteria for development that would help the business district. So I think both of these efforts are very valuable as the community insists on development at the Metro that is a good fit with our quality of life. And please do let people you know about the public hearing next week, as it's important for people to use this time to weigh in about WMATA's next decision. And thank you.
May I add to that?
Yeah.
Just the comments on the WMATA staff report are due at 2 p.m. on Friday, October 5th. The following Thursday, the Real Estate Committee meets to approve the staff report. So it's a very quick turnaround time once those comments are in. And did want people to know that it is on their agenda.
Thank you, Suzanne. I also wanted to reiterate what Joy just mentioned. Because the WMATA is not providing an opportunity for public comments other than written comments on their staff report, the City Council very much wanted to offer an opportunity to people to let the public and WMATA know of their continued interest in this issue. And so we are having this public hearing next Monday on the 24th. And I also wanted to make the point, because I was specifically asked this, this is an issue that residents on both sides of the state district line are interested in, and we would welcome comments also from residents of the District of Columbia who are also interested in this issue. We feel this is one community around this issue and would be very pleased to hear from residents of the District of Columbia also. And I would encourage people who do have something they want to say about this issue to feel free to come and participate in the public hearing on Monday the 24th. I also, one event I forgot to mention last week was on Thursday was the grand opening, believe it was, yes, Thursday was the grand opening of the Don Bosco Cristo Rey High School, which is a new school opening at the location of the former Our Lady of Sorrows school. And it is a Catholic high school, and it is aimed toward young people who come from disadvantaged families. And it incorporates both schooling and a work-study type program. The young people who participate in this high school program spend one day a week in entry-level type jobs at various businesses in order to give them a sense of the working world. And they also, even before they get their first placement, they go through a training course on how to act on the job, how to dress, how to deal with other people on the job, following their supervisor's orders, how to conduct yourself in an office-type environment. And so I think it can provide a good opportunity for a lot of disadvantaged young people who are interested in bettering themselves. And so we're very pleased to have this institution opening up in the city of Tacoma Park. Did you have something? Sorry, Ruben, I thought you were kidding.
I too enjoyed the Folk Festival and agree with my fellow council members' comments about it. I thought it was very well run. Ditto on the dog issue. I've heard a number of constituents talking about it, both pro and con, with a lot of very interesting, very thoughtful things to contribute to the discussion. And I hope that council will have an opportunity soon to hear some of these comments from the public and for us to discuss what we might do. It's pretty scary. Those kind of dog attacks are quite scary, and we need to address that. The last thing I want to mention is I've heard some concerns about the Maple Avenue Bridge work. There's a lot of concern about how the detour works. I don't really know whether it's possible to come up with a different detour. The bridge is quite narrow at that point. But folks are having trouble going around in the proposed detour because you end up having to walk on the side of the road much longer than you would walk on the side of the bridge. That is, the detour itself means you walk on the road a much longer distance. I don't know if there's a satisfactory solution to it. I hope the bridge work will be done soon. Do you know what the current schedule is?
No, I don't. there's a quick answer, I mean, a quick turnaround time if the work can begin very quickly, but if that doesn't happen, then it won't be completed until mid-November. So we're working on the quick answer for it, but we don't have confirmation of that yet. I will say we've looked really hard at how to handle the pedestrians going across the bridge, and it is a very difficult choice, because although the bridge is a shorter distance, it also has buses, and it's quite heavily traveled, whereas Hilltop Road is not. But it is out of the way, it is awkward, and any suggestions, or, you know, as we go through and try to find some other options, we'll try to improve the situation.
Thank you.
All right. There are no additional agenda items this evening, so the next item is the public comment period. This is the time set aside on the council's agenda for comments on items, well, since we do not have any public items this evening, it would be comments on anything you'd like to bring before the council, whether it's on our agenda or not. I'd ask when you come forward if you'd identify yourself, and also if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, my name's Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park. And last Saturday, we had a great demonstration downtown, you know, against the war, marching and dying down at the Capitol. And we had some discussions down there, and one thing that came up is a lot of cities are going to be asking their city councils to get resolutions passed, asking for diplomacy instead of violence as a solution to the war in Iraq, and asking to have an immediate end to the war, an immediate call to the table on diplomacy to try and see what we can do to bring you know, a peaceful solution to this. And I'd like to know if Tacoma Park has thought about that, and that would be really nice if we could, you know, get something to address that issue, and asking, you know, for nonviolent diplomacy, and asking to bring our troops home. Also, the Tacoma Park Folk Festival was really great yesterday. I had a great time down there. I was down there with the peace symbol and stuff down there, you know, trying to get, and telling people, you know, to register to vote, and getting people to vote. And of course, I was trying to get people to vote for Terry Siemens. Also, it was so great down there because a lot of people I haven't seen for a long time were down there. And there was a couple of people that even came from Pennsylvania that were down there at the demonstration. They came from the demonstration up to the folk festival. They stayed an extra day. And I thought it was really well run. The music down there, the field stage was great. And also, I want to thank Joy Austin Lane for the Chinese food she gave me at the end of the folk festival. She gave me some Chinese food, and it was really great. And also, I was so glad to see Terry down there, and Colleen and a few other people down there. It was so great to see everybody down there. And also, as far as the dogs are concerned, the pit bulls, there's a lot of bad press given to those dogs. Again, it's the way you train the dog and how you treat the dog, whether it's going to grow up to be vicious or aggressive. Because I know a person, John, in Virginia. I go down to see him sometimes and stay overnight, 2 or 3 nights. And he has a dog named Angie. It's a pit bull. And she always curls up at my feet. And I have no problem with that dog at all. She, you know, we'll be the whole night like that. And but a lot of people take those dogs, they train them to be attack dogs or dog fighting and stuff, as we all know. And that's, again, one of the most cruelest things you can do to an animal. Because once they're trained to fight, they cannot be adopted for any other reason. They have to be put to sleep. And as far as banning pit bulls, I don't think we should ban pit bulls. I think we should ban the mistreatment of pit bulls and the training of them to be aggressive. And if, like any other dog, the people have been attacked by collies, they've been attacked by Dobermans, they've been attacked by Rottweilers.
Can you wind up, Pat?
Yes, but I would like to ask people to really think about it. There's a lot of bad press, a lot of bull about the pit bulls. There's a lot of bull going around. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
And again, thank you, Colleen.
Hi, my name is Anna Summers. I reside at 7625 Carroll Avenue, and I just came here to report an incident that I witnessed on Friday that I thought would be of interest to the community at large and to the council in general, in hopes that everyone continues to follow up on this. On Friday, it's trash day on my end of the block, and I had the opportunity to see the sanitation workers come in, get rid of our trash. I was alarmed, though, that after they dumped our trash into the dump truck, that they proceeded to dump 5 bags of our yard waste into the dump truck as well, in the brown recycle your yard waste bags. I jumped out of my car and asked them what they were doing, and the excuse that they gave was that they were understaffed on Monday, which is recycling day for our end of the block, and so they were just making quick work of it. And I asked them to take the bags out of the dump truck and come back on another day when they had staff to put it in the proper place. Terry Siemens was kind enough to facilitate communication of this incident to Daryl Braithwaite, who has followed up with me, and it sounds like she's identified the truck that was responsible for this incident and has followed up with that, and there's going to be some disciplinary action. But I've thought about this incident and realized that over a year ago, I saw them dumping some of our recycling into the trash, and I immediately assumed that it was our fault, that there was something in the recycling that led them to decide that it needed to belong into the trash instead of the recycling truck. And I've also talked on the neighborhood listserv and with others who have seen the same incident over at least a year and perhaps longer. So my concern is that this has been going on for a long time. It may be going on across the city. It may be more than one sanitation worker. And so I think it's just incumbent upon the council to just continue to follow up with Public Works on a periodic basis to make sure that that there are systems in place to ensure that this does not happen, because the amount of recycling that could end up in the trash, is, we did some calculations and it was quite alarming. And that it's also incumbent upon the residents to know what the recycling rules are and to follow them. And if they see an incident like this that appears suspicious to them or that they don't understand, that they follow up with Public Works to report the incident, because that's really the only way that Public Works is going to know that something like this is happening and that they can follow up. So I just wanted to get that information out to the community so that we can all be good citizens and make sure that this does not happen again. Thanks.
Well, thank you for that comment, and I just want to say that I would reiterate your comment about letting Public Works know. Daryl Braithwaite, who is the Director of Public Works, was the person who initiated the city's recycling program before she even worked for Public Works, so she is very much committed to it. And I have brought issues to her attention in the past, and she's always followed up on them very quickly. And so I would encourage people, if they do see something going on that recyclables are not being disposed of as recyclables, that they should, let your council member, let the Public Works Director know about it immediately so she can catch it before it gets to be a problem.
The one thing I wanted to add to Anna's testimony is that the Public Works Director stated that having the number of the truck is very helpful to her, because the staff are assigned by truck numbers, and I think they can do some overlap depending on where they get to. So when you report, get the time and the date and the truck number if possible.
Good evening. My name is Christine Simpson. I live on Cedar Avenue. And I'm here tonight to talk about the metro development up at the Tacoma site. I know you're going to have a public meeting next week, and we appreciate that, but I just want to take a few minutes to let you know that there is a new group in the neighborhood called DC Maryland Neighbors for Tacoma Transit. I'm part of that group. It's a new group of DC and Maryland residents who are concerned about the development up there. Our slogan is Tacoma Transit First, No to the EYA, reject the EYA townhouse plan. And our concerns are that we think the proposal that's been put forward by WMATA doesn't really serve transit, shrinks parking, 85 or more townhouses are proposed, mostly with two-car garages, limits handicapped access, no western entrance for the people on the DC side, and definitely not an adequate return to WMATA, to Metro. And that's basically public land, taxpayers have paid for it, and the amount of money they're getting for it is not adequate. So a long list of problems with that proposal. We've prepared a single flyer for both the DC and the Maryland people. Our name is on here on the bottom. We've prepared a single flyer, and we've prepared a set of postcards. This is not to be confused with the yellow one that you were holding up. This is not the one that was overly flyered yesterday. And these postcards have addresses of political people on them, and the flyer is the same for the DC and Maryland residents. Postcards are different. So we have the four Maryland people on the Maryland one and 4 DC people on the DC one. It's all perforated. You can tear it, put a stamp on each one, and it basically has a list of concerns, something like what I just said there. So we handed all this stuff out yesterday at the Folk Festival. We've been flyering the neighborhoods. They're flyering in DC as well. And so I'm just really encouraging everybody to write to your elected representatives, Chris Van Hollen, Ike Leggett, the WMATA board, the Maryland members, for Maryland people, Governor O'Malley, anybody on the county council, everybody and everybody. If you send it to Marilyn Praisner, she'll share it with everyone. You've mentioned that there's a hearing here next week, and we'll all be here. We hope to get a lot of people down here to show, to support you all in your efforts. And I just wanted to mention our website. It's the same as our name, DC-Maryland Neighbors for Tacoma Transit.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tibet Wasaf. I live in Tacoma Park, Maple Avenue 77774. I'm here to express the community's concern about the proposed condo conversion. But before I do that, quick note. My son is very, very, very pleased and delighted to know that his comment about the breach is taken seriously and work has begun. And he had a little cold that would have brought him otherwise. And thank you for for listening to my child's voice. It's really important that he has evolved. I mean, he made a tremendous impact. So thank you very much. And maybe next time, sometimes next time when he feels better, he will come and say thank you personally. The second note is the Tacoma Park Maple Avenue Cultural Fair, the second one. We're very, very proud of ourselves. We use our own resources, our own time. This is the second one. It's like our second birthday. It was very wonderful. The weather was nice. And the third one, we're planning big. And hopefully next year, this time, I would see all of you say you've come to the event and you had a wonderful time. We're looking into business partnership. We're identifying businesses in Silver Spring area because the community has a lot of cultural asset that has never been given the opportunity to shine. And I think it deserves the light. So hopefully next year we'll have the participation of all of you. Okay. On a serious note, the condo conversion issue is creating a lot of nervousness in the community. People are very shy to sign a petition, and about 4 to 5 people have come to me personally expressing their concern. And we don't want to stand in the way of progress and growth, but we just want to be part of it. So we're going to have a couple of meetings, in fact, in this regard, and we want you to take the issue seriously and give the community an opportunity to sit in the development. And the proposed majority tenant approval is very, very vital and important. It gives us an opportunity to sit on the table. It gives us an opportunity to participate in the growth of the community. So I just want to make a reflection of that. And as I talk to more of the community members, maybe we'll organize our thoughts and come before you. So I just want to make that note. Thank you.
You're talking about the council's support for state legislation.
Yes.
It wouldn't be up to us, but it would be something we could propose to our state legislators and something we have in the past.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Felicia, and I'm segueing behind my predecessor here to talk about the subject of the tenant vote before an apartment building can be converted. This is going to be discussed tonight in the working session. I think it's the last item on the list. And I really think that the city of Tacoma Park should support this change to the state law. This change would require a 51% tenant vote before approval of a conversion from an apartment building into a co-op or a condominium could take place. And tenants don't have much going for them. The change in the law would help not only the tenants, all of us not to be displaced, moderate income, but also the elderly and the disabled, and there's more and more of us all the time with nowhere to go. So we need a seat at the table, which if you live anywhere else in Montgomery County, you know you don't have. So I think Tacoma Park really can set the pace. Tacoma Park is always up front, so I think they should stay out in front on this as well. The change to the law will give the tenants a seat at the table, as I said, to negotiate the terms of price and improvements, and this would help keep your neighborhood stable, you have an established tenant community, a stable tenant community. Let's help them stay in. If people had the money, they wouldn't be renting, would they? So they need a seat at the table. The petitions, we've now got over 100 signatures and climbing steadily. So there will be more on that. And that's really pretty much all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rosalind Grigsby. I'm Executive Director of the Old Tacoma Business Association. And I wanted to comment tonight on your work session topic of the gateway and wayfinding signage. I wanted to voice support from OTBA for this signage. We're actually very grateful that the city is taking this step. I think it's important not only for the community to mark their boundaries so people know when you're actually in Tacoma Park, which is not necessarily an obvious thing in this town, but also to point the direction toward our commercial district and towards our shops. I think there are actually a lot of gems here, and outsiders come and they say, wow, this is a really interesting place, but we need to help showing them how to find it. And so I just wanted to say, yes, this is a good thing, and hope you will look at this seriously and make it happen. I know city staff's been working on it for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. My name's Sabrina Barron. I'm the president of Historic Tacoma, and just so many things to talk about tonight. I want to talk about how wonderful the Folk Festival was as well, and I want to say thank you to Kevin Adler and to Nancy Abbott Young for working to explore the history of the Folk Festival, the 30th anniversary festival this year, and Nancy has done a lot of work going through her father's papers. Her father, of course, Sam Abbott, a former mayor, and one of the original founders of the Folk Festival. And it was great yesterday to see all the material and meet some of the original founders of the festival. I also want to thank Tacoma Framers for framing some materials for Historic Tacoma that Nancy provided that we had on display yesterday and that will continue to be displayed. And it's really great to see a wonderful community. Gosh, I guess we have to say tradition, don't we, instead of event, like the Folk Festival and everything that goes into it. So thanks, everybody, there. I want to echo what Roz just said about supporting the elements of the wayfinding program that are going to be discussed tonight. Gateway signage and kiosks especially, I think, are important. I think we really do have a wonderful Old Town, a wonderful atmosphere, and it would be great to pull more people in. So I'm happy to see the signage going forward. I also want to say something about the Land Use Committee relating to Washington Adventist Hospital. I'm also glad to see this under consideration by the council, and I want to urge you once again to honor your original promise to the community, which was to have a Land Use Committee as well as a Health Services Committee. And I hope there's a way that can be found for those two committees to communicate effectively with one another and to work together effectively without the burdensome charge of some individuals having to attend every meeting of both committees. There's got to be a way. We've got the technology. There's got to be a way that that can be worked out in some amenable and unburdensome way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, seeing no one else, we will move on to the city manager's comments. And Suzanne Ludlow is substituting for City Manager Barb Matthews, who is on leave for a couple weeks.
And I'm sure she's glad to be out. We're happy to not receive any emails from her, so I'm hoping she's enjoying herself. Two very brief comments. You already mentioned the Maple Avenue Bridge, so we certainly are trying to work to make sure that that is a safe and quick correction. You may have noticed that the lobby in the first level in front of the police department has been under construction. The work is continuing on the replacement of the Fritz tile. It should be done by Wednesday of next week, and we're monitoring it carefully. Also, I wanted to note that the ATM machine in the police lobby will be removed. Not enough people use it, and so unfortunately the credit union is taking it back. And that's all I have to say today.
Okay. Are there any questions about anything? Terry, yes.
I know I've already received some expressions of concern that the ATM is being removed. I understand the credit union has made the determination that it doesn't have the usage that they would like to see. They provided us with usage statistics so that we can have informed discussions with other financial institutions that might find it more agreeable, even though the numbers are lower than what the credit union want.
I know that we did get statistics. We begged and begged for them to keep it, and they probably kept it for an additional year longer than they would have otherwise. So some of our staff has been working with them, reviewing those statistics. I haven't seen them, but I'll find that out so that there could be other discussions.
Right. I would hope that we don't limit ourselves to the one institution now that they've made a determination they're not going to keep the machine here, obviously, because it's gone. But if we could talk to some of the other local banks so that we could provide that service to our residents and our employees.
Echoes of the pool discussion.
Okay, anything else? Okay. We will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is interviews with a couple of individuals who are interested in the Montgomery College Neighbors Advisory Committee. Gregory Blackley and Esther Herman, if you want to come and sit up at the table right here, we would appreciate it. And I also wanted to make a little correction, which I'm sure no doubt was a miscommunication between myself and the staff, was we aren't planning on doing the appointments for this particular committee next week. There are some additional issues that the council needs to deal with before we do the appointments, but we did want to go ahead and start with the interviews this evening. So, welcome. We're very glad that you're here, and we appreciate that you volunteered to participate in this committee. I think I'm going to start with ladies first, and I'd just like to ask you in general, Ms. Herman, about about your interest in the Montgomery College Neighbors Advisory Committee, why you're interested in being on the committee, and what you think you could bring to the committee.
Well, is this
Yes, it's
microphone.
it's supposed to be picking up. If we've got a sound technician in the back. If it's not picking up well, he'll fix it.
My voice is pretty loud anyway. I live near the college. I live at 511 New York Avenue in Tacoma Park, and have been a neighbor of the college for 35 years. I was semi-recruited. I was interested in finding a way to get involved with the community, and this seems like a good way to do it. We have been involved for many years, but there's been a gap, and I retired about 8 months ago, so I have a little bit of time to help out.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And Mr. Blackley, could you also talk a little bit about your why you're interested in the committee and what you would like to bring to it?
I can say I was somewhat recruited, but I have lived...
Well, we've got somebody doing recruiting. Are you recruiting? Oh, okay.
I do live at 704 Philadelphia Avenue. I've been there for 9 years. And I guess I have an attraction to college campuses, be it community, be it major universities, but being a resident, concerned about, first of all, my backyard sort of overlooks the college. And the fact that you want to make sure that if you're entertaining, you have something that is not an eyesore. Also, being a former student body president on a college campus, I understand the needs of the college campus. So looking for something to do in terms of extracurricular activity or being civic-minded, I felt this was a good opportunity to be able to be aware of the needs of the college campus, but also sensitive to the community. And I'm very proud of Philadelphia Avenue, and we all, on that particular block that I'm on, we all are close and we interact with each other. So to represent the group was something that was important to me. So.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Did you have anything you wanted to ask?
I do. Well, I'm not sure it's a question. I would like to thank Esther and Greg both for serving in this kind of transition time, and I think that the committee's work has been very substantial for the last several months, and I'm pleased to see that. Can you give insight to the council who may not know in detail what you're doing? Can you say some of the projects that you've been working on? I think they'd be very interested in hearing.
Well, I was attending, I think I attended 2 or 3 meetings, so that just to kind of get my feet wet, to see what was happening, to see what the advisory committee was doing. I read over the materials that had been written. I don't think they were all of the materials, but what I was given was some. And my first assignment was to take pictures of houses along New York Avenue, and I had a wonderful time kind of looking at it, because you can live there for a long time and be a neighbor at the college. I have taken advantage of some of the courses at the college in the past and appreciate its being there, but I have the same concerns as other neighbors. I was also there during the Block 69 era and observed police and citizen interaction, and my children were in pictures in the newspaper. We had quite a time. And so I've been interested for a long time in the community's relationship with the college there. And I, with interest, have been watching the Performing Arts Center go up, because that's a particular interest of ours. So I took my pictures and I submitted them, and they were all laid out, and I found that a lot of what other people had done was familiar to me. And so this is what I have done so far, and I'm still learning.
Yeah, great.
And likewise, I attended a couple of the meetings early, I guess, during the summer, and sort of caught up with what had been going on. Provided, I guess, a different perception in terms of listening to folks from the university and their concerns about wanting to build a good relationship with the community and recognizing that we're residents and we're not an adversarial type group, but to be one that is mindful of the needs of the community as well as the college, and was able to share some of that in some of the meetings that we've attended. And I, too, took photos along Philadelphia Avenue and Tacoma, and it gave me an opportunity, for one, to value the diversity and the homes that exist in our neighborhood, and then to look at the college and see where they want to go, listen to the need for growth because it is growing, and I guess being able to offer a level of sensitivity, saying that, okay, as you are growing, architecturally, you want to be as diverse with the campus as we are in terms of our own homes. Because if you go through Philadelphia Avenue, or the whole area, you'll see the diversity in terms of the architecture. So I've been able to share that information, and we did together. We all took the photos and laid them out and interacted with the members who are already on the advisory committee to be able to talk about, what we see the needs will be in terms of looking at future growth and being mindful of the need to keep the community or our homes a part of the, that diversity, but the campus too.
Well, I appreciate that. The only thing I'll say in closing is I am very glad that you were able to come in tonight. I know this interviewing process is kind of a new one for this committee, but it's really the standard way that the City Council adds people to council-appointed committees. So you're here tonight. I'm anticipating Mark Friedman and John Huffhanen, I think his name is, that they'll also be interviewed and that your appointments will be made eminently. And I do appreciate you continuing to participate in the committee's process. It's very important work that you're doing.
The council is going to take up probably on October 1st a discussion of the structure of the committee. And I believe that we will probably do the appointments very shortly after that. So we appreciate it, and I always appreciate people who care enough about the community to volunteer to do things like this. So we very much appreciate it, and then we appreciate your coming in here this evening. Is there anybody else on the council who'd like to? Yes. Okay.
I also want to thank you for volunteering. It sounds like you'll both be very thoughtful and considerate members of the board. And I'm impressed that you made it 16 years without ever calling in sick.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, I too want to lend my support for people who volunteer on committees. I live over near Columbia Union College, and so I'm familiar with the stresses and strains that happen between a large institution like a college and the surrounding community. And I appreciate that you're going to be willing to stand up for the community when that's necessary and to make sure that the college is supported when that's the appropriate thing to do to balance the needs of it. Fortunately, the Montgomery College has an opportunity to expand in another direction, and that's worked out extremely well for both the college and the community. It was a real inspiration to get that to happen, and it's, in fact, working out rather well from people I've talked to. So I hope you'll continue in that kind of a tradition of innovative ways to work on problems. Thanks.
And I'd just like to thank you both for getting involved with the committee before your appointment so that when you're appointed, you're up and running and know what you're getting into. That's very helpful. And I just want to add my 2 cents that if for any reason any of the discussion or anything on our agenda gets delayed, I want to make sure that we get appointments happening. And given that you've been interviewed and we're going to appoint you, want to make sure that the committee doesn't have any problem establishing a quorum for meetings and can continue to do good work.
I would second that.
Well, thank you both very much. We appreciate your volunteering.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the discussion of the proposed Community Legacy Program application.
Good evening. I'm David Sells. I'm the associate planner with the city. The Community Legacy Program is administered by Maryland DHC, Department of Housing and Community Development. It offers grants and loans for capital projects and a bid for operating costs. And basically, the projects must fit into a comprehensive revitalization strategy. So the city application here has 4 projects. 2 of them are going to be carried out by the city, and then the other 2 are by Tacoma Main Street and Historic Tacoma, So in a minute, I'll let the representatives here speak about those projects. The two city projects, they are based on council's budget priorities for financial year 2008. The first one is New Hampshire Avenue Corridor Initiative. So this is the New Hampshire Avenue initiative that we've been working on. What we're proposing is for a community legacy grant to supplement the existing work, and the funding would be for capital improvements such as streetscape, public art, additional facade improvement grants, sidewalk trees, and also business support, and that would be through operating funds. The second project is neighborhood commercial area enhancements. This is funding for small-scale improvements that are covered under the master plan workshops that city staff held in spring 2007. These cover 6 neighborhood commercial areas. The funding would be for placemaking, streetscape improvements, gateway improvements, sidewalks, and landscaping. And they'd be based off these workshops and the master plan, the 2000 master plan recommendations. So those are the 2 city applications. Now, the city projects out of this one application. Now the 4 projects must be ranked in this application. And so the ranking that we propose is the ranking that's on this memo here. And that's based off of the city's priorities, the council priorities for 2008. First one being New Hampshire Avenue Corridor Initiative. The second one being the neighborhood commercial area enhancements based off the master plan recommendations. The third one is Main Street Tacoma, and I'll let the representatives of Main Street describe that project now.
I'm Rosalind Grigsby. I'm Executive Director of the Old Tacoma Business Association. And with me is Dan Robinson. He's Chair of the Economic Restructuring Committee of Main Street Tacoma. Main Street Tacoma is an initiative of the Old Tacoma Business Association. For all intents and purposes, it's what we do. Main Street is what we do. And I'm going to let Dan present the proposal that we have for the Community Legacy Fund.
We have 2 things, 2.5, I guess, things that we're proposing. One is a market study and community business plan effort so that we can gather information and have a clear notion of where we'd like to be as a business association, or as a business community and as a residential community along the Main Street corridor. We are also looking for, that would be soft money. This legacy fund has, I think it's $6 million available for bricks and mortar, and $500,000 available for admin support, that sort of thing. I don't know how many applications they're expecting to receive, but it might be over 100. And I think that the average award for a project is under $100,000 for the bricks and mortar, and somewhere down to $20,000 to $30,000 for the soft money. So the marketing study and community business plan, we're going to ask for $30,000 for that effort. We're also going to ask for $20,000 in administrative help for that effort, and also for our larger project, which is a revolving loan fund. And what that means, this would be a grant application to the legacy group, legacy fund. What that means is that they would give Main Street and the city, we're asking for a $150,000 grant for that, and that would be to leverage projects in the Main Street corridor. We would loan that money out with the anticipation of having it repaid. We would work out the details of the interest rate if we chose to ask for an interest rate, so we could make it quite attractive to people who wanted loans to develop their properties, build their properties out, and so forth. It's a capacity building exercise for us. We want Main Street to build capacity for itself, to have the wherewithal to leverage projects along our corridor, and we feel it's an important project. It wouldn't, because of the $20,000 administration request that we're making, we're hoping it would put no burden on the city, or a small burden on the city. It would have a small impact on your budget, we would hope, and we would work closely with staff. We've also started conversations with folks at the state level who recommended that we make this application and recommended that it be a grant, and also at the county level for people who have run these kind of funds. And we understand that it's important to have a CPA on board and banks so that we can do the underwriting and take care of the details necessary to let these grants out, or let these loans out, and have them brought back in a timely and efficient manner.
I'm Sabrina Barron. I'm the president of Historic Tacoma, and as I hope all of you know, in September of 2006, we purchased a historic vacant commercial building in the Tacoma Junction area that we have since then been in the process of rehabilitating and restoring. And we're trying to do this through raising grant funds. That's really sort of the only realistic way we can do it at this juncture. We became interested in the community legacy funding at the suggestion of Roz Grigsby of OTDA, and we've talked with city staff about it, and we're bundled into this application because each municipality can only submit one application. I hope you've seen we have an active rehabilitation restoration project going on, and I think we're pretty much the only one of those at the moment, at least in the Main Street commercial corridor. And what we're trying to do with this funding is to complete the fundamental basic interior build-out of our building. We've gone to some other funding sources, and we will go to others as well, but we would like to get the building into a basic condition of being able to occupy and use it, so we can go forward with some of the programs that we're interested in providing for the community. So I've put together a construction budget with the assistance of Jim DeLuigi of Universal Consultants and Designers, and the assistance of Eric Anderson, who is an architectural conservator who works for Worcester Eisenbrandt out of Baltimore. And he lives in Tacoma Park and also happens to be on Historic Tacoma's board, but he's overseeing the restoration project for us there. And I emailed this around to all of you, and David very thoughtfully printed out copies for me, and I'll give them to Jessie, and she can pass them on to you so everybody can have a chance to look at it. And so I've itemized each item here. Jim and I did this with the help of RS Means Building Construction Cost Data for 2007. Jim is a long experienced architect and consultant himself, and then Eric's input on the restoration angle. This has been one of our challenges, is that a lot of what we need to do with that building is restoration and conservation rather than just pure construction. So Eric had some very good information on those. So you can familiarize yourself with the itemized list, and what we're asking for in construction costs comes to $203,510 by our estimate, and when you put a 20% contractor's markup on top of that, that brings our total to $244,212, which is a sobering sum of money, no question. We had a very useful session with Sarah and Alana, and it was their strong feeling that we should go for the whole enchilada and see what comes out. So this will fundamentally put us in the building, and will continue to be a big shot in the arm to the junction area. Since our project started, there's been another interior renovation project started there for a new business that's coming in, and it's kind of the, if you build it, they will come kind of philosophy. It's our feeling that once we start doing things like washing our building, which made a huge difference in restoring the facade, rehabilitating the interior, and we start to get programs there and foot traffic in the area, that's going to be a huge step toward revitalization of the junction. I think I'm correct in saying, as I've said in this application, that I think this is the first time since the redoing of the co-op that there's been a project like this in the junction, and it's time, and we need municipal help to do it, so we appreciate your support.
Okay. Is there anyone on the staff that has additional comments, or anyone else that has any additional comments? Okay. Bruce.
Yeah, Sarah, could you just explain why all of these are bundled under the city when I thought there was a time when they were going to be separate applications?
It was one of those Keystone Cops sort of scenarios where we were getting different messages from different folks at the state level. And I believe on Friday, we were all getting different messages. And on Thursday or Friday afternoon, we finally got the word that there can only be one application per community legacy area. And because the city of Tacoma Park is in its entirety a community legacy area, we needed to package all 4 of the projects together, which puts you in the position of having to rate those projects based on community development or community revitalization priorities. The community legacy plan in itself consists of the master plan, the 2010 plan, and then more of a general plan about providing redevelopment or revitalization efforts throughout the community for economic development, commercial development, as well as housing-related projects.
Because the difficulty I have is that all of these are good projects, and I don't particularly want to put anybody last. And given that Historic Tacoma is in process of doing this rehabilitation, if they don't get the funds that they need, that's just going to drag everything out, and it's going to leave the junction in dire need of that project being finished. Like I say, they're all good projects, and I'm not quite sure what to do to kind of fix this, and it would have been a lot nicer if there had been able to be separate submissions. It would have solved this problem. Don't suppose we could give them all a number 1 and send them in.
You know, that would be really nice, but it's not going to be possible.
What's your sense of how they've funded stuff in the past? Any sense of kind of what comes in and what percent, kind of what percentage of the total that gets submitted is the funds available?
At the risk of sounding cynical, it depends on where you are in the election cycle. Last go-around, we did not fare well, nor did, frankly, any of the applications from Montgomery County. David indicated in his cover memo the average award for a capital improvement project, which would include the Historic Tacoma's project, the revolving loan fund that Dan and Roz have proposed, as well as many of the activities included within the city's projects, averages about $125,000. Based on past observations, it ranges from the $40,000 that we got for the facade improvement program the last time around, up to $600,000. It depends on the extent of the project.
And it did not follow the ranking of the application.
Right. They can go through, look at this whole thing, and decide that they like this one little line item in your budget for this one project and fund that. And then go down to the 4th priority of your list. So it unfortunately puts you guys in a position where you have to prioritize them. But
it may not have
it
much
may
effect on
not
what they
translate into how the projects are actually awarded.
Then why do they make us do this?
Because they like to test you. No,
But it seems to me that one thing that we could clearly do would be to put some wording in our application that says, we have been forced to rank these. However, we think these are all very worthy projects and would commend all of them to be funded. I mean...
And we can do that. It was
to make it clear that we're not ranking them because we
well.
think some are better than others. We're ranking them because somebody made us rank them, but we'd like to see them all funded. The other thing I think Sarah may be cynical but correct about the political stuff. But on the other hand, you know, the city of Tacoma Park has not done badly in the past with this funding source. And so because the average is X doesn't mean that that's what we would get. And I think that the reason that we've done better sometimes than the average would be because their applications are good applications. And I think all of these projects sound like really good projects. And if they're all good projects, they should all be competitive, right?
And though it's awkward to have to decide and sit on the head of a pin, I would like to put in a small plug for the prioritization of the New Hampshire corridor. I think that little has happened, and history has shown this, without the city leading by example. And we have seen that as we have prodded, things have happened there in an area that has long been neglected by the county and the state and is now really sagging under the weight of increased population, traffic, and of course, years of neglect. I remember a year and a half ago when we took the bus tour around there, and we all popped out at several different places, and one of them was near 410 in the little shopping center there, and we all clustered around this one young man who was standing on the sidewalk there. He was actually teetering dangerously and precariously on this piece of concrete sidewalk that had come undone from the rest of it, and he was waiting for his bus, and he said to us, "Can you believe in a place like this I have to take my life in my hands just in order to board a bus?" So we've begun to see already some positive changes there. Sidewalks have become ADA compliant. The bus stops are now set back, and they have some nice concrete bricking there. And that very same place where this guy was teetering is now, you know, fairly safe for him and others to board the bus. So I think that in looking down the pike, it will attract more county and state money. It will attract private sector money, but only to the extent that we show the way and that we can accelerate this process, which will include affordable housing, more retail options, a more aesthetic and cleaner environment for the people who live there, but only if we lead by example. And I think this particular project would be very helpful in doing that.
Okay. And I think Carrie had his hand up too. Did you have?
I didn't get to finish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right, no problem. I just wanted to point out one thing in the frequently asked questions that you provided us from the program, where it says, rather than request support for an individual project, participating communities must develop a comprehensive revitalization strategy that's an ambitious but reasonable response to local needs by offering funding for several diverse initiatives simultaneously. Community Legacy can help local governments and their partners implement comprehensive strategies that give a community the necessary momentum to reverse decline. And I think that's exactly what we're doing, and I think it has to be that comprehensive approach to any number of areas and not just say, you know, here's number one, here's number two, pick this. We've done the work that they say that we're supposed to do, and they should be funding these. And there was one other thing. I can't find the other thing. But I think it speaks to, as much as possible, we need to word this thing to say, if you really want the rank order, we've done it, but it really doesn't mean much because we've come up with a comprehensive approach that's just what this program is supposed to fund. And, yeah, well, I know what it was. Matching. To what extent do they weigh any matching that takes place, and how, if any, how are any of these provided with any matching?
Sure. Matching is not necessary, but it is considered. And so, I mean, what you're talking about with comprehensive programs, I think all the projects here will be able to show that they do match, whether in-kind services or other funding sources, such as New Hampshire Avenue Corridor Revitalization Initiative. We already have put a lot of money and staff time into that programming, so that's going to be the match for
And-
the project.
And do we highlight that in the applications?
Yes.
There's a fairly detailed budget that is included for, required of each individual project.
And what's the submission deadline?
October 2nd. It's October 2nd. You're scheduled to consider a resolution which would include the ranking on September 24th, and David's goal, because we have to submit this electronically, is to submit it September 26th.
So next week.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. A couple questions first, Sarah. Is there anything that limits this to just 4, or is there anything that would make it better if we just had 2? I mean, does that influence our likelihood of getting what we want?
I don't believe so. It's
It's not-
based on the quality of the project.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. All right, well, these are the 4 we have in front of us, and this is one of those ugly times in a council member's life where we have to make a decision, and there's going to be people who love us and people who hate us based on our decision. But I think as I look back at this council's priorities and what we have established as a priority for not just this year, but I think as we look forward to the next few years, I think economic development is a key thing in redeveloping our business areas, our commercial areas. And so I really think that the 2 projects that are listed, number 1 and 2, for the New Hampshire Avenue, the one for the New Hampshire Avenue area, number 1, and number 3, the Main Street Tacoma program, in my mind, bubble to the top because they are organized efforts for redevelopment of an area. But I think the work the Historic Tacoma is doing on a single project in the Tacoma Junction is very key to that neighborhood, as Sabrina said. And so I would make that number 3. And then the number 2 project, the neighborhood commercial area enhancements, would end up as my 4th pick. And if it were to enhance our application, I would even vote to drop that one if it was going to make the other 3 more likely to be successful.
I note all 4 of these proposals have a great deal of momentum behind them, and that's exciting. It's, I believe, important for all 4 of them to be put forward, and it's our job, as well as the organizations you all represent, to put forward the best possible application. And I like the way that the comprehensive approach wraps around all 4 of these. I agree with Councilmember Siemens that the New Hampshire Avenue and Main Street Tacoma are things this council has prioritized, and I think those really have to be our first slot. And then the Historic Tacoma initiative is very exciting as well, and it's a close second. The neighborhood commercial area enhancements are also quite important, and I've been to some of those planning sessions that city staff have held, and I've really liked the way you got the community involved, and you recorded what they said, and kind of brainstormed about what might be possible in those locations. So I don't want to see any of these 4 lose momentum. I think they're all really important, and I hope that our priority can be emphasized on all 4 of them.
Ruben? Yes, I can see how this happens. I, too, really support the package of them, that is all 4 of them, because I think as a package, they emphasize a vision for this particular area. If you just pick one, then it to me, would give the impression that you have just a very narrow view of what this kind of development should be. The fact that we cover, I think, 4 different kinds of stuff is actually, to me, a big plus, because it emphasizes that Tacoma Park is looking at the big picture. And I would disagree with my fellow council members on the importance of the neighborhood commercial area enhancements, because I think those are, at least the ones I've seen, a great way to leverage a relatively small amount of money for a big bang, because many of our smaller, Tacoma Park is this peculiar thing with the little commercial areas, and you know, 25,000 here, 35,000 there actually will go a long way to spruce these up, and would encourage the local businesses to do the same at the same time. So it's a real synergy there for me. So I would hate to see that one put as number 4. And it's, in my book, I wouldn't put any of them last, so I'm not going to put it in a ranking, because I really do think that as a package, it's a good package. It looks at some very important parts of the down county and focuses on them. In New Hampshire, Main Street Tacoma is on its way. I love the historic Tacoma idea, frankly, because I think it'll just be an outstanding project when it's done. So I'll stop there, because I think it should be a package.
You sure you haven't been a politician more than 8 months?
I think they're going to look at the packages and pick out the pieces that they want, and it really doesn't matter how we rank them. Are 2 or 3 eligible for CDBG funding?
Sections or portions of 2 would be, that would be the Flower Piney Branch commercial area, part of Maple Sherman, but not all of it. Old Tacoma would not qualify, sections of the New Hampshire Avenue would. I'm missing one. The only 2 that would qualify would be Erie Flower Piney Branch, and the lower section of New Hampshire Avenue.
Okay. What about the historic Tacoma project?
No.
So, for all the reasons that Doug said, I would like to keep the New Hampshire Avenue project first. But I think to some extent they're going to look down and pick and choose. And I guess if I were going to move one of them, I would actually move the historic Tacoma project. And the reason is I think to some extent when you're reading through the projects and you're looking at the Old Town project or the different master plan identified, community identified projects, those are things that fit really well into the description of what the Community Legacy project is about. I mean, they're much more of kind of a mirror reflection of it. And I think that it might be harder for people who don't know the community and know the historic Tacoma group to see that. And if they saw it 4th on the list, I think that might have an impact. So I think strategically I would move it up higher on the list. I think it would have more of a chance of getting funding without necessarily impacting the chances of the others of getting funding. I think it's more likely to be left out for being last than the other ones are, if that makes sense.
There's a certain elegance to the package, and therefore it makes it lovable. My worry from a pragmatic point of view, and someone who might be sitting looking at dozens of proposals from all over the state, is the first thing I'm going to look at is the total budget. And then I'm going to be so busy and so harried that I'm not going to put the effort in to go through one by one and pick the parts of it or them that I think are best. So I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to try to find a way to make it clear what is the first among equals, or make it easy for the pragmatic rankers and raters of these things to not have to work very hard to figure out what's important for the area.
Well, we have a variety of proposals on the table. And I guess I would agree with what everybody said about the ranking being less important perhaps than what we say about the importance of this package for us. But various council members have put on the table various proposals for different ways of ranking things, and they're mutually exclusive to some extent. And
I think there was some commonality. I think that, certainly the New Hampshire Avenue redevelopment ended up as number one on, I think, most people's lists.
Okay.
And I think I would suggest that the Main Street Tacoma initiative would have strong support for number two.
Well, I'm not sure Ruben would agree with that.
Well, we don't need Ruben to agree with it if the rest of us do.
Noticed that.
And I'll just kick in with my ranking, which is in the numbers they've got on the blue sheet. Mine is 1432. So I think we've got fair commonality that 1 is top and 2 is bottom, and it's just a question of how we rank Main Street and Historic Tacoma.
Agreed.
Well, I don't agree that 2 is at the bottom myself.
I'll agree with Bruce.
And let me just say on both 2 and 3, I think I'd like to Colleen's point about CDBG, and I think there's some other possibilities for funding 2 and 3 more than there are for 1 and 4, and I'm not sure about the timing on kind of being able to juggle those. When do we hear back from Legacy, or is that an open
Community
question?
Legacy Awards should be announced following the Board of Public Works meeting in January. And these are FYO aid funds, so I'm assuming that they'll issue a contract and encourage people to start spending right away. It's a 2-year grant cycle?
Yes.
Just as a point of information, there are other programs available through the state for a variety of projects. At the same time that they're taking applications for this, they're also looking at community investment tax credits, like the Liz Lerman project was before. It's just, and next week you'll be looking at an application for Neighborhood Business Works loans for a new business that's going into the junction. So there are alternative funding options out there. They are all as competitive and a little different than the Community Legacy thing, in that the Community Legacy program provides for a grant or a non-repayment, where the balance of those require the repayment of the loan or of the funds.
I'll mention that the Legacy Fund and the Main Street program at the state are run out of offices that are close to one another. I don't know the extent to which they're the same office or whatever, but there's a certain
Under the umbrella.
That's under the umbrella. I wouldn't say bias, but there's an umbrella for Main Street programs.
Okay, Bruce has put a proposal on the table, which is to rank them using the current numbers. 1, what did you say, 432?
Mm-hmm.
Can the council
I could
live
agree
that?
with the 1 at the top and 2 at the bottom, which was the way his proposal started.
Yeah, I actually heard more people prioritizing Main Street over Historic Tacoma.
We're just going to have to sort of figure that. I hate to sort of spend a lot of time thinking about this. It's either going to be 3-4 or 4-3. Does anybody have? Actually, only because the Main Street covers sort of a larger area, I guess I would put it ahead of the Historic Tacoma, but I agree with moving Historic Tacoma up. So I would be in favor, I guess, of 1, 3, 4, 2.
I second that.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Ruben said no.
We just need Doug to say okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
All right, okay, that's what we've got.
So just for clarification, you're rating it the New Hampshire Avenue Initiative, Main Street Tacoma, Historic Tacoma, Inc., and then neighborhood commercial area enhancements.
Right. Okay. All right. Is that's pretty much, and we're going to get a resolution supporting that, I think it's coming up next week.
Next week, there'll be a resolution. We'll be sure to include in the resolution language addressing the fact that these are all priorities. We'll address, list out the priorities itself, and then that'll give us the authorization to proceed with the actual submission of the application.
Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is a council discussion of the Land Use Committee related to the Washington Adventist Hospital site. If you remember in our last discussion of this issue, the council agreed that there should continue to be 2 committees and that we should begin appointing people to the Land Use Committee. I believe that the only issue that was still outstanding, the council wanted a way to ensure that the committees work together, sort of without them having to make special efforts to do so. And it was just a question of how that would work. So unless the council really would like to repeat its past steps and go back, I suggest we start from where we are.
I think that we'd like the council to revisit it because that wasn't entirely our committee's recollection of how the discussion was ending.
Okay.
And there are some factual errors in the blue sheet that you received this evening.
Okay. Council, although the cover sheet indicates that the committee has not made a decision, there's no way to imply that it hasn't been discussed. This issue of separating or having one group or 2 groups by any means, they have discussed it on numerous occasions. And we have, we reviewed, looked through the minutes again, and there was a general consensus that the committee had discussed. The plans were to send it in a letter to the council, but that didn't get done because we concentrated on the health issues more so. But I would like to read to you what they have discussed. The Health Services Committee wanted to thank the council at the time for meeting with them in July 2nd, 2007. The census of the Health Services Impact Committee is that the council should retain a single advisory committee with 2 working groups to deal with linked and independent health services and site usage issues created by the expected relocation of Washington Adventist Hospital. Health Services Impact Committee welcomes and requests the committee's inclusion of persons having expertise in the full spectrum of issues.
That was voted on, and so the consensus of the committee was that it should be of the HSIC committee, the Health Services Impact Committee, was that we should have 1 committee, not 2. And my recollection from the July meeting was that it was left pretty much up in the air. If I had to have guessed where the council was at when I walked out the door on July 2nd, I actually thought that you were leaning towards 1 committee with a couple of work groups, so I was a little surprised to find the opposite was the case. It would be helpful to know a little bit more about the reasoning behind that, because there are a host of reasons, though I'd love to talk about why I think that 2 committees may not be logistically feasible.
My recollection, also having been there, because we did discuss the issue of a single committee versus 2 committees, and I think we had very clearly made the decision to go to 2 committees. And I think the only thing that was on the table was how those 2 committees would relate to each other, whether they would have an executive committee that was sort of over both of them, or whether there would be sort of a common element in the 2 committees. I don't know if the rest of the council's recollection, but I recall that we basically had made the decision to keep, I mean, we're talking about keeping because that's what it says in the law now, keep the 2 committee structure. I think the other members of the council remembered the same way I did. And so I think we're sort of past the decision on whether it's 1 committee or 2 committees. And if the question is how those 2 committees are connected. And what you're talking about is similar to what we were thinking about in terms of an executive committee, because we were thinking about one of the ways of sort of connecting the two committees was to have an executive committee that would essentially be members of both the committees that would meet together to sort of set overall policy for both groups. And the other way is to have some members in common who would commit to sort of being liaisons between the two groups. I think if there's other ways that we could go, people should let me know, but I do think that that's what we had come up with at that point.
I think that having two committees is simply going to facilitate miscommunication, and it's going to be more difficult for the two committees to achieve any sort of consensus that would be helpful to the council when it comes time for it to make its decisions. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think there are 10 or 12 people waiting in the wings for. I think there are, from my discussions with Councilmember Clay and Councilmember Berry, I think there are some people waiting in the wings who are ready to provide their planning expertise to the Land Use Committee, but I don't think that there are 10 or 12 members ready to fill a new committee. And our committee is, we're depleted enough that and I speak for the whole committee when I say this, we felt like, adding another 5 or 6 members to our committee still doesn't get us to a full roster based on, the original charge that we were given by the council. And I also think that since the committee, my committee, our committee, was leaning heavily towards having me be the liaison between the two committees, I told Vanita when she called and asked me if I would be willing to do that. I said, yes, but unless the committees can, coordinate their schedules to my schedule, meaning meet on the same night, in a staggered fashion, I've got too many family commitments to really be able to do that, and nobody else on my committee seems eager or able to do it either, much as we might like to. So I'm concerned about, frankly, volunteer burden as much as anything else, and that's another reason why I think one committee would work with, two distinct groups. We've clearly already got a committee that has, healthcare providers, consumers, researchers, and I'm certain that there are people out there who have a great deal of expertise in planning issues that could join the committee, but I don't think that there are, 10 or 11 folks out there chomping at the bit to form this committee. But you all would know better than I would, because I haven't been, going around tapping into people.
Where you are, Drew, is where I started off, and I didn't succeed in convincing the council of that. So, Terry.
Thank you. I guess the way I have viewed this is that they are two distinct, different tasks that don't require interaction between the committees, then I would make them two separate committees. I thought from what we had discussed last time that there seemed to be a need for a lot of interaction, and that's why I, at that time, supported a single committee. I'm unconvinced that two committees is the best solution. But
where you come.
Well, that leaves me that if we are to revisit the question of how many committees, I would favor the work being done in a single committee. But I'm not sure that's what's on the table tonight.
Yeah, if a majority of the council wishes to revisit the item, as I'm looking around, I'm not seeing people interested in revisiting the issue. So I think that one has sort of, for whatever, been decided. And so let's move on to the next.
Before you do, I know Councilmember Clay's had her hand up, but
Yes.
I have a real question. Could you, Mayor Porter, or anybody else, frankly, explain what the two distinct missions of the committees would be? Because one question that we've had in our committee meetings is, what would the distinct missions be? There seems to be such a strong overlap between what we've been doing in our committee and what this other committee potentially would be doing. But maybe we're misunderstanding what this other committee would be charged with.
There clearly is an overlap. Were you going to address a different issue?
No, I was going to address that issue.
Okay, why don't you address that issue, Colleen?
I remember the specific conversation that we had when this was going on because, to me it was related to, how we relate to Washington Adventist Hospital and the message that we gave them. And I asked the question specifically about whether or not the Health Services Committee was just a committee to deal with Washington Adventist Hospital, and if it was going to be used essentially to develop data to affect what's the name of that process?
Certificate of
The
Need.
Certificate of Need process. And I was told emphatically that no, it was not that it was in fact a committee about health services needs for the entire community, and not just, within the jurisdiction of Tacoma Park, but, within our Tacoma Park community as kind of the greater Tacoma Park. And therefore, this committee that addresses the health services would be looking at issues that are not tied to a particular piece of land, and might be looking at how they could fulfill health services needs through a variety of different mechanisms, some related to the opportunities that will avail themselves if Washington Adventist Hospital does leave the city, but also that its charge would not end when the issue of whether or not Washington Adventist stays or goes, or what happens to the land, that its charge would be ongoing to deal with the issues that we have of health services delivery to the folks in our community. Whereas the Land Use Committee is just specifically related to a particular site of land, and it has a limited time span, and that is until the property is developed or its development direction is determined through sale and those other mechanisms.
If I could ask a question about that, because my recollection is very similar to what you just described. It almost seems as if the HSIC, Health Services Impact Committee, if it were charged with continuing to do what it's already doing, and it had purview over healthcare development, and then this other group had purview over non-healthcare development, then I could sort of see it, but I also thought it's just insane to be splitting it that way. I mean, for one thing, some of the potential development that will go on off of the actual campus, or might be recommended off of the actual campus, let me just throw out as hypotheticals that aren't exactly hypothetical, primary care clinic at, Long Branch or something like that, or primary care clinic at Langley Crossroads or something like that. Those actually are pretty closely tied to what's going on the campus, not because of the campus itself, but because of who owns the campus and, who might be leveraged to build those sorts of things. And so I've thought about this, my committee's thought about this, and we just thought splitting development issues into two different committees seemed to make very little sense. Another reason why we just thought one committee and a couple of working groups made better sense.
I understand, and and you're my constituent, and I've listened to everything that you've said, and I understand what your position is, but I think that the council themselves have come to a decision that two committees are the best approach. It's the approach that I support. There, as passionately as you feel about it, there are many people who feel very passionately about having two committees and having a separate land use committee. And I could name 5 people right now that I know are ready to go on a land use committee just from Ward 2, and I haven't even put it out on the listservs asking people about the land use committee for a year and a half since this first started. So
some of those people are good friends of mine. I mean, and we've talked about it. So I understand that there are other people who are, very passionate about it. But I do think that the communication between the two, I'm not sure what the value added is to the 2 committees. I can see some value added to the 1 committee, if only because of, the burden and the difficulty of communicating between the 2 groups and meeting separately and things like that.
And so I think now that we've come to the conclusion that we'll have 2 committees, the next thing for us to look at is how to address that issue.
Yes, I agree with Colleen. I think that if I had 3 constituents and one of them was interested in mixed housing development on that site, another wanted a box store, and a third was concerned about the effect on traffic, I would want a separate committee who had the capability and the expertise to look at all of those things, and I don't think that's the same skill set as people who are qualified to make health planning decisions. So I would go with the 2 committees, as I thought we had decided before, and I don't think the communication problems are as difficult and complex as maybe we think they might be. I think if both committees are keeping notes and those minutes are shared widely between the chairs and members of both of them, I think you will be probably pretty much informed week to week as things go forward, and as it makes sense to meet and exchange views, you'll probably be able to figure out a time and a method to do it. And I certainly thank you for all of the time that you have put in and will put in. I can't think of a more important issue for the future of the city than the work that you're going to do.
And maybe you should count your blessings that it will be a separate committee.
Can I just say, let's take the box store off the agenda.
I said that if one constituent.
I want to, Vanita wants to put something in here, then I'm going to get to Ruben, yeah.
Council, I was just wanted to bring to your attention that the Health Services Impact term expires in February 2008, and perhaps you might want to consider extending the term.
Yes,
so
I think we would.
Continue to do the work that they're doing.
I think the council would. Is there anybody who has any objection to extending the term? I don't think anybody will. Yes. Okay. Ruben.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I favor separate committees for all the reasons that have been mentioned before. And
Subcommittees or?
No, 2 separate committees.
Oh, sorry.
That would be good. Having served on committees that had seemingly overlapping functions, sometimes it was nice when they could be split between 2 people and didn't fall all on one group of people's shoulders. And I agree with Councilmember Berry that the difficulties of communication are really exaggerated a bit. I think that sending each other notes and sharing decisions that you make and so on will actually be sufficient. I don't think there has to be a lot of formal structure to this, frankly. I do think that the HSIC will complete its work, as I can understand, perhaps not by February, but relatively shortly. So I think that you guys have done a tremendous amount of work. When I looked at the questionnaire and stuff, it was really coming along. I was very happy with the work. So I anticipate that you guys will complete your work and we'll have a report, and then the Land Use Committee will start up and work on this kind of fairly separate topic. And I too have had constituents, not necessarily all in my ward, but other people in Tacoma Park have indicated interest in serving on the Land Use Committee. So I actually don't think we'll have more trouble than we do with any committee filling that out.
Bruce?
Yeah, I'm in favor of 2 committees. I think it may be hard now to anticipate exactly where the overlap or the disagreement, if there is one, may come, but I think Eventually, we have to anticipate that there will be a reason to maybe have a more formal liaison between the two committees. I'm not sure what that is, but I think we'll need to continue to be mindful of that and be prepared to set that up in some way before we have need for it, so that we're not trying to kind of fight a rearguard action if there's some strong differences between the committees that don't really have a good way to be resolved.
Sort of a minimalist way of doing an interaction between the committees is simply to have at least one member and hopefully more than one member in common between the two, so that there is somebody who can say, oh, no, that isn't what the other committee did, they did this instead. And even written information passing back and forth doesn't always get, you know, what you say when you said such and such, somebody else might read differently. So I think having an actual body and an actual brain and memory that is shared between the two committees is probably an important thing to do. And if the council isn't understandably interested and willing to isn't interested in setting up an elaborate structure, then perhaps what we could do is take Drew up on his somewhat coerced but nonetheless very generous offer to be a member of both committees and see if we can't get some additional people who might come forward who also might be interested in being members of both committees. And so then Drew wouldn't have to always be in the position of attending every single one of both meetings. And then we could do it that way. That's sort of the most minimalist approach I can think of to ensuring communication. And I think Bruce has a point. There's between sort of thinking about land uses and thinking about health care, those are different ways of sort of approaching or framing the same issue. And it wouldn't be surprising if the different approaches sort of came out with, you know, slightly different points on various things. And it would be helpful if any potential differences between the two committees could be worked out between the experts in the area rather than having no way to work out any potential diversity of approach except by having sort of a public discussion of those things. And if you are willing, Drew, with the understanding that you obviously can't commit yourself to showing up at every meeting of every single committee, but if you would be willing to do that, and if we can impress upon the people that we interview for the Health Services Impact Committee or the Land Use Committee, the interest the council has in having members of both committees, or the importance of both committees working together, so they might be flexible enough to enable you and whoever else would be willing to do that coordination. Yeah.
Mayor, would that mean that some of the members of the other members of the Health Services Impact Committee, if they're interested in serving on the other committee, does it mean that they might be allowed to also
Sure.
serve as a representative?
Sure. No, I'm willing to entertain people's interest in pretty much anything they're willing to do.
If I might, one of the things that we've asked so that we can be able to try to draft the committee structure and the information for you is to have a sense of the charge of the committee. When the Land Use Committee was first proposed, the land was going to be completely vacated by the hospital, and there were certain land use issues that come up from that move. Now the amount of vacating the property is uncertain. There's certainly lots of land use regulations to learn about and the different options. There may be designing a community process for how you get input as to desired uses, desired massing, desired design, those kinds of things, or there may be ideas about how to consult with the various parties about what might go on the site. Is there a charge for this committee that we can, I think that would be useful even in thinking about, you know, who would have interest in overlapping on the committees.
I don't recall exactly what the charge of the Land Use Committee currently is, but I'm not sure that the notion that a portion of the property rather than all of the property might become available for other uses necessarily changes it that much. And certainly the kinds of things you mentioned continue to be important. Terry?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, following Councilmember Berry's logic that this is really a separate issue, and thus we should have a separate committee, I wonder why there should even be a liaison between the Health Care Committee or the Health Services Committee and the Land Use Committee any more than there would be between other city committees and the Land Use Committee. You know, there are...
Well, because I think there's a great deal of overlap also, and because they're both talking essentially about the same primary institution, which is Washington Adventist Hospital. In one case, it's services. In the other case, it's the land it occupies. That puts them closer together than, you know, say, the Health Services Impact Committee and the Arts and Humanities Committee, which...
Or Public Safety Committee.
Or Public Safety or whatever, yeah. I don't see that there's... I think there's a much closer connection between these two committees than there is between committees that the council normally sets up.
I'd also add to that because of the relationship that we've been developing with the administrators over there, we've actually already entertained discussions with, or had discussions with them, essentially brainstorming sessions about possible uses, you know, how they might possibly use the site, meaning what they might leave or what they might not leave. These have actually not been discussions that we have entirely initiated, but because they've already been working with us on a number of things, they've decided to bring these things up with us. In part, I think that may have been driving some of our feelings about why this ought to be one committee, but I'm not going back there. I understand where you're all at. I'm just, you know, as a little background, we've already been talking about some of these land use issues with them.
I think that's a good reason that you should be on this other committee also, because I think definitely the committee should have some information, some of that history on the committee. So I appreciate it that you have readily agreed with your arm behind your back twisted to do this.
And to Suzanne's question about the charge for the Land Use Committee, you know, I think simply put, I think what I'm looking for is the generation of scenarios, proposals of, given the limitations and constraints on the property ownership, what would be the best uses of that property. I'm not looking for one overarching suggestion. I'm looking for multiple possibilities and proposals.
I think if I could just add to what Doug said, I think that in a sense you've got a committee looking at what's the best way to provide health services to the community, and the other committee looking at what's the best use for that site. Now, it may turn out that those are two ways of asking the same question, but I don't think we want to assume that to start with.
Mayor, would the Land Use Committee begin to implement its charge after the certificate of need is presented by Washington Adventist Hospital? Or would you be able to have an idea of what the hospital is recommending, or would they start earlier?
I think my personal impression is they should start earlier. Colleen?
Yeah, I think that they could start now, because something's going to happen to that site, whether they get their certificate of need or not. And that's what they're looking at, is the site.
I suspect that they will eventually get it.
Probably, but either way, something's going to go on at that site, and it's going to have an impact on the surrounding community. And I think that's really what the people who are interested in the Land Use Committee are interested in, is, you know, how those changes will impact the surrounding community. And another thing that I'm interested in addition to the components that other people have laid out, is what the fiscal impact of different choices are on the city, and the impact on the city's existing service spaces that would serve whatever those various potential uses are.
Does that mean that the land use committee is likely to be focused on an area that's larger than the 12 to 16 acre plot? You know, looking at the surrounding area?
In the sense that how you develop the property has an impact on the surrounding area and the surrounding community, absolutely.
So they won't be constrained to just look at that plot of land?
It's about how the development of that plot of land
So if the
impacts
development
the
of that
community.
plot affected, neighboring areas, that would still be in their purview?
Right,
Absolutely.
don't forget traffic. You've got to look at roads and traffic. We have a long history of traffic.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely vital.
And I think another thing that committee could do is look at the different healthcare proposals that come out and what are the various impacts on those different proposals, and how would you address that, and what are the standards that you might put forth that would help to mitigate some of the issues that might come up from a variety of different kinds of uses.
I agree with the comments that my fellow council members have made about the charge, but there's an issue we haven't really talked about, which is that the hospital desperately needs the city of Tacoma Park to approve whatever they decide to do. I got a very strongly worded letter from Holy Cross that was sent to a lot of folks about their concern on what would happen to healthcare in the Down County area, or actually the whole area, if the hospital is removed. And I'm concerned as well. I think it's not a slam dunk that the hospital will in fact move. It could be delayed many years. The hospital was talking about 5 years. I think that's wildly optimistic. So I think that a committee that looked more broadly at using other pieces of land, the impact on traffic, as we were just talking about, on the community itself, depending on what is put there. If there's some kind of commercial stuff that's put there, that'll have an impact on the community. If it's something that blends better with the college, that'll have an impact on the community as well. So I think a very broad general approach would be very useful for that committee.
Scary. Not a comment on your.
Right, right.
Is that helpful, Suzanne?
I think so.
Okay. And thank you very much, Drew. I understand you are now the single co-chair of the committee. So appreciate all the work that you've done on the committee and all your insights, and also appreciate your willingness to help us facilitate this ongoing sort of expansion of the committee, of the work that we want done on this issue into two committees. So,
Truly, I think we should be thanking my wife.
well, please extend to her our thanks. The council is going to take a very short break and come back for the three remaining items. fabrication and installation of the interior building signage. I know this is something that people have waited for a long time. I'm always getting questions about the very creative but not very durable paper signs that appear all over the building, and the interest in having a more permanent form of labeling rooms and giving people directions. So.
Well, staff does it all, and we did over a weekend put up the paper signs just before the building opened so that people could get by.
And we appreciate that.
And I appreciated my son for helping us get some of those up. But nobody wants to see them gone more than I. I know many of you want them desperately, but I really, really want them gone. There's a discussion item before you on bids for fabrication and installation of primarily interior building signage, with a couple signs to be posted on the exterior of the building. We did go out for a request for proposals in July. We had a bid opening on August 31st. For this proposal, we received 2 responsive bids, one from Northwest Sign Industries Incorporated of Moorestown, New York for $48,000, and one from Serigraphic Sign Systems of Minneapolis for $61,479. The project involves the fabrication and installation of 249 signs consisting of 20 different types, from very simple room numbers that meet ADA requirements to fairly nice directional maps and directional signs through the building. These have been looked at, given the way that patterns are through our building, through our community center, to try to identify where are the key destinations and how to best get people to those key destinations. One of the things that we had a lot of discussion about is what do you do about people with multiple languages or that don't speak English. What we did was we chose several key destinations and came up with icons for those destinations that are then put next to the names for that, so that we will be able to at least identify how to get to the library or some other key destinations by use of icons. $35,000 was allocated in the FY08 capital budget for this program. The lower bid is $48,000. We reviewed the bids. We do not recommend rebidding. We don't want to delay the signage any longer. But we also don't feel that the price would come in much lower because of the complexity of the program. So we do recommend accepting the bid by Northwest Sign Industries Incorporated. Because it would exceed the budgeted amount, it would require a 2-reading ordinance. And those items have been tentatively placed on the agenda for the next 2 weeks. One of the things I'd like to draw your attention to is that the primary identification sign for the building does include Tacoma Park Community Center, Sam Abbott Citizen Center in the same font, in the same prominent, attractive way. We also tried to have fairly attractive and consistent signs with an azalea theme as part of the decorative background element of many of the door signs, in reference to our identity as Azalea City. This means that there's even azaleas on the men's room. I think that we tried to make sure that it's an attractive, decorative community center. But we also worked very hard at not over-signing the building. We tried to make sure that signs would be posted in the best location and that they would be simple and at a regular kind of pattern so that it looked uniform and understandable to the person walking through the building. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Ruben?
I think in general, the signs, at least in the signs that you have in here, are really delightful, and it has helped me learn how to spell hydrangea, which anyway, it's a great name. But I do have a question about one of the signs in particular. I noticed that the staff signs have removable insert kind of thing. And I was a little concerned about the hours of operation sign on...
Actually, that's incorrect. The actual text for it would be more correct. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I jumped ahead at what I thought you were talking about having hours of operation printed on the sign. Is that what you're asking?
My question is, will they be printed on the sign, or will they be something that we can change?
The signs for most of the rooms will have an acetate inside.
No, not the rooms. I'm really just concerned about the hours of operation on the
Yeah,
community
that one
sign.
would be a permanent sign.
Yeah,
And we've looked at try to figure out some alternate ways. I can try to go back around with the designer on that.
Would it be possible to split the sign?
I'll check and see.
So that replacing it just meant replacing a panel rather than the whole thing? The reason I mention that is that's the one kind of thing that, it's easy to envision it changing.
Right.
Actually, we were supposed to take it up as an issue, not too distant.
Right.
I'll double check on that. It's a very good point. It's something that we've looked at a lot. It is why on the room signs, we do have acetate panels that we are able to actually use our copy machine to reproduce on the acetate so that if a new person is in the room or a new use for the room is determined, that can be changed easily.
So Terry's hand and then Bruce's.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I really appreciate, Susie, that you're bringing these signs to us finally, and that we're getting a chance to vote on this so that we can approve this and get them installed. It's been long overdue. I just have one concern, and that is the name of the building. I know that we recently amended our agendas to say Tacoma Park Community Center, Sam Abbott Citizens Center, but I find that people still get confused about what to call this building. Even tonight I heard someone refer to it as a municipal building. Most frequently we hear it and we see it in city advertisements as the community center, and yet many years ago it was dedicated as the Sam Abbott Citizens Center. I would like to suggest that the building have a single name, and since the city did pick the Sam Abbott Citizens Center as the name many years ago, I think we should stick with that name. The community center was something that was a term that was used during the development of the renovations that we did, but it's very cumbersome to have two names for the same place. And it's something that ends up not being used, and which is a disservice to Mr. Abbott and his family and supporters.
If I may, the resolution directed the building to be labeled the Tacoma Park
Yeah, we
Community
had
Center,
this
Sam
discussion,
Abbott
Terry,
Citizen
about a
Center.
year ago, and the
And
council made a clear decision.
So we provided the resolution to the graphic designers. We insisted that they follow the resolution. If you'd like to bring that back for a change in the resolution, then
I think the city staff then should follow that resolution whenever they refer to the building and use the full name and not just Tacoma Park Community Center.
Well, I mean, we said we would do that. We have changed the agenda, so we're going to do that. But, I mean, the council, if you remember, did have a full discussion of exactly this issue, and this is where we came out. And so I really strongly discourage going back.
But the city staff does not use that on anything except the agenda.
Well-
And now we see it on the building sign, but I think that we should be using that in all communications about the building, because that's what our resolution said.
Bruce.
Remind me that I had something else that I wanted to talk about, but I'm happy with the way things are. I don't think we can force people to call a building something. And I never refer to it by any of those names. I call it City Hall. And nobody's going to force me to call it anything but that if I don't want to call it anything but that.
We'll issue you a citation every time you say City Hall.
Yeah, and what I'm also thinking about is there's a certain airport that is centrally located in this region, and it has always been called National Airport, and then there was a decree to call it something else, and it remains the fill in the blank, National Airport. I don't use that name, I call it National. And so I think people are going to call them what they're going to call them. And I'm happy with the resolution that we came to, and I think with putting the name on the agendas and putting the name on the building, people will be much more familiar with it, and there will be more general usage to call it. Many people, I'm sure, will call it the Abbott Center, and that'll evolve over time. The point that I wanted to get to was I'm hoping that with the implementation of these signs that we will no longer need to have the building and the railings draped in banners. I would be happy to see no more banners around here, but I think the banners have been used to fulfill a function that we used to have at this building that we no longer have. I believe I think it was a Cadillac drove over the brick sign out front at Maple in Philadelphia that used to have the signboard where there were temporary notifications of upcoming events. And we've lost the ability to put certain things out there, and I think what people have done instead of that is to make banners and drape them out there. So I think the one thing that this proposal doesn't do, and I'm not saying I want to hold this one up in any way because I think we need these desperately, is that we'll need to think about a way to provide for the ability for some temporary signage to go up and not use banners, but to use a more permanent signboard of some kind. And I know that the only kind that people will not want is one of those flashing red LED things that they did not want at CVS or at John Evans Andrews School.
Which actually is
any number of
funny
other
you bring
places.
that up, because actually that's another topic.
One of those other, any of those locations where those have been in, people have reacted very negatively to them. But I know that I know there are issues with having the manual one where you put the letters in. You got to have staff do that, and the letters tend to fall. But there must be an answer to providing for temporary signage other than draping banners all over everything. So if I have anything to say about it at any point now or in the future, there will be banners over my dead body.
We could probably do that, yes.
I know, that could be arranged.
Terry.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I did have one other question, that is, and Bruce alluded to it with the signage that we have outside. I know that we use one of the banners to demark where the police station is, and I didn't see anything that addresses that so that it's clear when people pull in where the police station is. And I realize that's not an interior sign.
That's part of the wayfinding sign system, and it also will be part of how we identify kind of where to park. And there's signs that will go in that also say the police station. I've got a full signage program here that you can see.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments? The council obviously isn't deciding this evening, but there'll be I think probably a one reading ordinance awarding the bids.
Yes, this is
Two? Okay.
This
even
one's
though-
two, the wayfinding is one.
Okay, because this exceeds the budget.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's go on. Speaking of wayfinding, let's move on to that. Nobody objects. Will you object to that? Oh, okay.
I have a comment.
He's getting ready to be first on the next.
Okay, all right. I think we'll let David say whatever he's going to say, and then we'll let you jump in.
Say it, but make it quick.
All right, so at the same time that we posted an RFP for the internal signage, we posted one for the gateway and wayfinding signage for fabrication and installation. We received 6 bids listed on the back page of the packet. And the packet also has a map of all the proposed sign locations, images of all the signs, and a complete listing of all the sign locations. There's $60,000 in the budget. The cost comes to $57,600 84. We're recommending the lowest bidder, ImageWorks Incorporated, out of Virginia. Do you have any questions?
I realized I wasn't in on the design phase of this. I can blame Mark for that, I suppose. But I noticed by looking on the map, there are some locations that do not seem to have any new signs. Could you comment on why there's nothing over at Flower and Piney Branch, for example, is such an obvious one, or at Carrollyn University? I mean,
sure.
There are lots of signs along Eastern. I'm glad to see that. You know, every street gets a sign, but then there's lots of other places that don't have signs.
Right. So, well, two things. First, the wayfinding signage program works in conjunction with New Hampshire Avenue Corridor Initiative. So a lot of the signs are around New Hampshire Avenue Corridor. The second thing is that a reason this wayfinding signage program has been going on for years, well, one of the reasons is that we've been held up with State Highway Administration regulations. And that's why you won't see too many signs along state highways. It's because of the regulations.
But the question was, for example, there's a gateway at Flower and Piney Branch.
Right. State highway.
Yes. Well, but we've got them other places. I think, actually, Mark brought up a similar issue in terms of the signs, and if I remember the answer to that, it was what David said, but in addition to that, that a lot of the signs were designed to point the way to essentially interior business areas. And so I think some of those signs, if I'm not totally making this up, if I recollect what the answer was to that question, because Mark did ask the same question essentially.
Well, you have all the signs out along Eastern Avenue, which are not part of the New Hampshire corridor, at least as I understand the New Hampshire corridor. So that's kind of what caught my eye.
A lot of them are historic district signs.
Oh, okay.
Terry.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I will preface this by saying that I have not been supportive of this program from the beginning, strictly because of the cost and the amount of money that we've put into design, the amount of staff time we've put into trying to develop this. And I remain concerned that we are looking at spending a whole lot of money to put in these signs that, although they think the concept is good, I think there are many more things, higher priorities that the city has, not the least of which is to keep our taxes low. And I'm not going to, hoping I'm not opening up the discussion to say what a fraction of a cent this is, but I think, you know, paying about $1,000 a sign is excessive. I look down through and I don't see a lot of the signs that are pointing to our business districts. I see a lot of signs and looking at the map that are saying that you're entering Tacoma Park, which is a nice thing to tell people, or that you're entering a historic district, which is nice. But if you subtract all those signs and look at just what's pointing to our business districts, and we're not allowed to put those along the state roads, which are the primary arteries that surround our city, then I wonder if we're actually achieving the goals that we initially set, which was really to point to our businesses and the institutions that we have here in the city.
We have had luck with working with property owners in some of the business districts to install, for permission to install kiosks, and that's sign type D in the packet. And these kiosks serve as placemaking and also just a way to beautify the business areas. And so we have 2 kiosks in the Crossroads area, one at Ethan Allen Gateway and one in Old Town, Tacoma. Also, all the signs serve as placemaking and also beautifying and traffic control, traffic calming. And that's kind of what the variety of signs and their locations kind of signify on the map.
Yeah, I think there would be some people who argue that they're not necessarily a beautification of the city by adding a whole lot more signs. I think the signs are attractive, yes, but I think minimizing signs along the roadways is a little bit more beautiful than maximizing the signs. Again, I go back to we call this whole project the Wayfinder signs, but I think the signs that actually point the way are very slim on the procurement that you're suggesting here. How many, I think H's are the ones that actually point people in a direction of a business or an institution. Is that correct?
The H actually is just in the community center, the Sam Abbott Citizens Center. But the gateway and wayfinding signs, the terms can be used loosely, and it's entering the city, entering a commercial district. It creates more of an environment for each of the areas. So, I mean, the terms are used loosely, but it's...
But I'm not so concerned about the term as I am that thinking back about the initial goals of this, the primary goal was to point people to our business districts and to point people to the hospital and the colleges and the other centers in Tacoma Park. And I don't see that in these signs. I see labeling where the city is, who we are, where the historic district is. There are, yes, a couple of kiosks with maps that are going into business districts, but the primary goal, which was to point people to where our business districts are and where our institutions are, I don't see them in here other than the H sign, which says this way to the community center, not the Sam Abbott Citizen Center.
Colleen?
I have a question and then a comment. It says the cost is $57,684, but on the spreadsheet on the back, the total for ImageWorks is $48,832.
There's an addition of 2 kiosks, pedestrian kiosks.
Oh, okay. And are those reflected on the map?
Yes.
Okay. So then, that's my question, and my comment is that I get asked by constituents all the time when we're going to install the signs, and so I support the signs for both the part where I was standing out in the hallway for the community signs and as well as for the gateway and wayfinding signage, and I think we've talked about it and assessed it and everything else, and I'm ready. Let's go install the signs.
Ruth?
In looking at the bid sheet, what struck me was that the low bidder had in all but 2 cases the lowest price on the signs, but had one of the higher prices on the installation. Do you have any sense of why that might be?
Well, we went back and we asked the 3 lowest bidders to break down the installation per sign.
Per sign type or per
sign type, right. And, I'm not a statistician. I just kind of looked it through, and it seemed to be broken up evenly with all of the 3 lowest bidders when you looked at the final price of the signs. So, I'm not sure. Each to his own with pricing out.
Yeah, because I wondered, what drove their installation costs so high, and wondering whether, if there are additional signs to be done, whether there would be a reason to, say, for instance, pick the next lowest bidder.
Right.
Which happens to be the lowest bid on the previous discussion.
Right.
And their installation costs are the lowest of all the bidders, and therefore, if the sign mix were slightly different, they would be the low bidder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, the final bid price stayed the same when we asked them to break it out individually. But when we were looking at the new individual prices with the installation added on them, the comparison was still, ImageWorks was still slightly lower.
Right. But if there were one less A2 sign, Northwest Sign would be the lowest. One would think, depending on what installation cost ImageWorks subtracted.
Right.
And so it just strikes me in making the comparison that there's something weird going on there. I'm not sure what, if anything, to do about it, but
It may be a difference between what they decide is fabrication, what they decide is installation.
yeah, they may just assign costs differently. But I would think installation would be take the post hole digger out there and dig the hole and put the post in and run a couple bolts, and that's that. And to have one of them be...
Would it be possible to just buy the signs and have our own Public Works install it? Which would save about 40% of the cost?
I think we'd have to rebid it because it was bid as a package.
I don't know that, our Public Works puts in signs that are metal poles on the ground, but some of these are a bit more elaborate than that.
It wouldn't necessarily save us money if they had hired extra people to do other things.
How many people are willing to go forward with this basically as it is? Do you have an objection to it, Bruce? No. You're willing to go forward with it? Okay.
I want it to happen.
Okay. I think there is an interest in moving forward with this, and if there is, if there are concerns, then obviously council members, as they always are, should feel free to express the concerns. Yes.
I just had one question, David. Have you been in communication with the business leaders in town who have been in the past anxious that we do this program, and have you let them know that the program no longer includes the signage that they were hopeful that we would put in?
I've been in contact with many of the businesses in the city, not all of the businesses, and I'm not sure which business leaders you're referring to.
Well, I know that some of them have come to the council meetings in the past supportive of this project when they were, as it appears, fantasizing about having signs pointed to the business districts, and that no longer is the case.
Yeah, I have not heard that. I haven't heard that in the past 2 years since I've been working on it. But I do know a lot of businesses are very anxious to have the pedestrian kiosks, especially in their areas.
Thank you.
Yes, it would be nice to have these signs up before the country runs out of oil, in which case the pedestrian kiosks will be very useful. The vehicular signs, less so.
Okay. The final item is the proposed state legislation. There's a list. Suzanne, did you want to say anything?
Yes. The state legislature is getting ready to meet again. The normal process is that the Montgomery County and Prince George's County delegations begin meeting this month, and the General Assembly begins meeting in January. There may very well be a special session in advance of that January opening date to discuss budget issues. However, we try to get our priorities for the state figured out now, especially because if there's any legislation that needs to be submitted for the local delegation work, we need to submit that by Wednesday. And so what I would very much like is a discussion. I'll go over the items that I have here and another one that's been raised. But in particular, if there are items that you recommend to pursue as a local bill, I would need to transmit that to our District 20 delegates and Senator tomorrow so that they can submit the request for the legislation. The items that I have before you are items including expanding and preserving revenue for municipalities. This deals with issues of revenue flexibility. It also deals with issues that we've raised consistently on municipal tax duplication. Bruce, do you want to go ahead and talk to that one at this point, or?
Sure.
Maybe I could go through first?
Why don't you go through
Okay.
and then...
The second one, you heard from several tenants at the public comment period. There's been a tenant group looking at legislation in its interests that represents people both in Tacoma Park and in Silver Spring. They have been passing around a petition that urges us to submit, in Montgomery County, to submit legislation that would require approval of a majority of tenant households before an apartment building might be converted to a condominium. This is a portion of a bill that the City of Tacoma Park had proposed several times before and was almost passed 2 years ago. I would like to indicate that we do have petitions with about 117 names that have been submitted so far, urging us and Montgomery County to propose this legislation. I do think that this may be a useful local bill for Montgomery County only, as opposed to a statewide bill. The third is allowing municipal aggregation of electricity, which opt-out aggregation, which we have urged for many years. And then the final item, I noticed that there was a request again for mercury switch removal of automobiles. This is something that our environmental committee raises. It is best coming from the council as opposed to from a committee, and we've been supportive in the past 2 years. I would think we would want to work with them to urge that legislation, and that would be a statewide item. Those are the items that I have heard from people, and I know Ruben raised an item that maybe there's some ways that we can look at more municipal authority in some of our housing choices, and that's something I'm going to investigate and bring back to you.
Okay. Bruce, did you want to comment on any of those?
Yeah,
as a member of the MML Legislative Committee.
Yeah, if I can just give a kind of a final little wrap-up to where the MML Legislative Committee is at this point. I've kind of briefed you as we've gone along, but the final recommendation of the committee last week was to go forward with 2 legislative priorities. One of them was enabling legislation statewide for speed cameras like we have in Montgomery County on the trial basis. Some question was raised as to whether legislators might say, well, let's get the results from the study in Montgomery County. The general feeling was that everybody wants this. It should be able to be passed again. The veto by the prior governor may not be an issue this time. It's a legislative priority for MACO, for MML, and for other groups. There's a lot of momentum behind this. So that was the one single simple priority. The other one that was adopted was adopting the submission by Tacoma Park for additional revenue options and using that as the umbrella to cover a number of the other issues that were brought forward. The language was to adopt as a lead priority our submission for expanding revenue options to provide maximum flexibility to assess and react to the changing state budgetary landscape, to maintain the option to consider the pursuit of other legislative requests and additional alternatives as appropriate, and to protect existing municipal fiscal resources. And just to let you know, the ones that were submitted that were taken in under that umbrella, it was the one that was first and foremost and had the most support in the committee was double taxation, which was to make all of the counties in the state shall counties, so that every county shall provide a rebate to municipalities, since there are a number of counties where they're not required to and they don't. And once everybody gets on that level playing field, then it's much easier to get everybody behind a better process for rebates. The other ones that are bundled in there are getting a better split on the hotel motel tax, changing how apartment buildings are assessed. That came from Greenbelt. The state gasoline tax exemption for municipalities, the building excise tax authority, and how street utility fees are authorized. So those will be, some of those will possibly go forward. It just kind of depends on whether there's a special legislative session or not. So that expanding and preserving revenue for municipalities will be a statewide issue. And the committee rejected allowing municipal aggregation of electricity since there was a bill, I don't remember the number, but they kept referring to the bill number, which essentially sent that to the study group, and the feeling was that it's going to go nowhere as a priority until the study group comes back, so that there was very little discussion of that as an issue. So I would imagine that we should follow the statewide lead and assume that that one's going to go nowhere this year. I think the other ones that have been mentioned on here, the conversion one and the Mercury Switch one, would be good ones to put forward.
Colleen?
I also got the email from the chair of the Environmental Committee and would like to support adding the Mercury Switch legislation to the list, and as well the items that Bruce mentioned. I have a question and then a comment. So the question is, how does Greenbelt propose changing the way apartment buildings are assessed?
It's mostly getting at when there's a limited liability corporation and there's the sale of the corporation and sale of the assets, including the apartment building. There's no way to break it out and reassess the building, and therefore the taxes on that stay at what they were before, even though the ownership has changed and the value has gone up.
It's a big loophole, and it's a way of getting around paying taxes on property transfer.
So it's just the property transfer tax. It's not the baseline. It's not the
Well, it's
assessment.
anything.
But there's no homestead credit on apartments, so how, why doesn't it get reassessed every 3 years, like everything else?
The difference, it also gets to the way rental units are assessed versus the way owner-occupied or condo are assessed. Because, of course, the tenant units, those buildings are assessed based on their income generation.
Right.
And the other ones on their market value.
And
So
are they proposing they all be assessed on market value?
No. With a asterisk.
Okay.
That they be reassessed based on their market value for what they are. So that if it were a building was totally occupied by tenants and it remained occupied by tenants, but it was sold as a limited liability corporation, there's no way of breaking out what that new sale figures its value is. based on income generation.
Well, unfortunately, we have to do this by Wednesday, but I would love to hear more about that, because I definitely think things should be
And that,
assessed at the turnover and pay the transfer taxes, because that is a potential source for generating income for other affordable housing activities. But at the same time, if we also supported something that shifted the way apartments are assessed so that it got away from the income generation of the apartments, we would be squeezing our property owners and coming closer to a takings case than that.
right. And I think those discussions can take place at the legislative conference and after, because those are just ones that are out there as potential ones. But any action we take tonight in no way supports that as an individual effort.
Well, I would definitely support the transfer tax portion of that. It does, sounds like I don't know enough about the other one. So that's my question. My comment is that regarding number 2, requiring approval of majority tenant households before an apartment building may be converted to a condominium, I think that the period for that is past. I think that it's, anyone who's any builder who's in the process of building a condominium unit that can at this point switch it to rentals in most markets in the D.C. area has long since done so. And I think that, from my perspective, what would be most beneficial would be a just cause eviction law. And I think maybe that's not proposed because it's just a non-starter at the legislature level. But just cause eviction could go a long ways to protecting tenants who want to stay in their housing long-term that are evicted for a variety of ridiculous reasons, some of which are to make it easier to convert to a condominium. So I don't know, probably people who have more experience over the history of the state could speak to that better, but I would think that that would be worth pursuing at some
We have
point.
supported that in the past, and I think it might be a good idea to put it on the list. And what it would mean, there is a just cause eviction law, but it only applies to counties and not the cities. In other words, only counties and not cities can opt into it.
But the primary problem with it is that it's only, I believe, covers like a 6-month period. So it's a very limited rule. It's been very hard for the counties to enforce even. So I think that trying to opt into it as a municipality without changing the text of it wouldn't get us very far. The discussions that I've had with housing officials are that there needs to come up with some language that allows the counties to also enforce it, because right now it's just very difficult to enforce.
Well, I think we should do that. But I do think that we should go with the number 2 also. I don't agree. I think for right now, the condominium conversions have slowed down because the housing market is so terrible. But I think having something like this in place before the housing market heats up again is going to be absolutely important. And, we lost it on a tie vote the last time. I mean, we had 2 tie votes in a row. And I think, there's new people in there. And I think if we can just get and this was looked at as a local bill. It would only apply to Montgomery County. And so if you get the Montgomery County delegation to support it, I mean, you've basically got it in Montgomery County. So I think I really strongly encourage us to get behind this condominium conversion bill, because I think it's really important for the tenants. And it will, the next time the housing market heats up, it will become relevant again. And Terry's got his hand up, but then I'll let you speak to that also. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Porter, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I won't reiterate what you said on number 2, the condominium conversion bill. I basically support the 3 that are on here. I disagree with Councilmember Williams regarding the municipal aggregation of electricity. I think the opt-out aggregation would be a significant benefit to the residents of Tacoma Park. So I would encourage us to leave that on the list. I don't see a downside to doing that.
And you may just be disagreeing with the legislative committee on that one.
Yes, I don't think Councilmember Williams will speak for his personal, but go ahead, sorry.
I was disagreeing with his recommendation that we consider pulling it off. Anyways, and I also agree with the micro switch, our mercury switch.
Mercury switch, yeah.
Bill, we should add that to the list. And, I would support Councilmember Clay's recommendation on the just cause eviction law, but that I will defer to staff's recommendations on where we go with that.
Really?
Yeah, Terry pretty much hit it. I support leaving the municipal aggregation in there just because I don't, what do we lose, I guess I should ask a question. What do we lose by including it? Is there some downside?
I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I would recommend that we keep it in there too, and that we see if we can get our legislators to put it in. It's been sent to study committee, but what was sent to study committee, I believe, was hooked onto the bill, which would also revamp the Public Service Commission. They were putting there together, and the assumption was that the new Public Service Commission would do such a wonderful job that it would make a municipal aggregation unnecessary. Well, I think that was an unrealistic expectation, but in any case, I don't think there's a downside to bringing it back.
I guess I would agree. The discussion will be, what to do with re-regulation of the electric industry, and how that actually gets finally worded is one of those back and forth items. I think if this is kind of in the mix and people see it, it has a chance of being included. But if it's not there, it could easily be overlooked. Municipalities are always overlooked unless they really put, wave themselves around. And so I would recommend, if there's an interest in that by the council, that we put it forward.
And I would also recommend that we go to MML and ask for support of that, not as a priority, but as just a piece of legislation, which I assume they would do since they've supported it in the past. So we see if we can get their support for it. And my personal feeling is that re-regulation of utilities is like stuffing the toothpaste back in the tube. I just don't think it's going to be a successful venture. As a matter of fact, I would suspect that what's going to get called re-regulation is going to be something considerably less than one would think would fall into that term. And so I still think there's going to be a role for electrical aggregation. Bruce.
2 quick points. One, just to let you know that the Greenbelt initiative for the assessment on properties was actually got the lowest rating of any of the possibilities for bundling. It had the lowest weighted vote and the lowest average vote of any of those. And I'm happy to support keeping municipal aggregation in there. I can tell you that my prediction will be that whether we ask for support from MML or we try and get our legislators to do it, they're going to throw it right back over the fence at us.
I'll be happy to check on that.
In terms of what I need to submit in the next day for local legislation, again, I would recommend the condominium item number 2 as local legislation for Montgomery County. One question would be, do we want to recommend the just cause eviction as a Montgomery County local bill, or do we want to do a state bill? Why don't I look for some text for that and see if we can't do it as a local bill and see if that can move it forward a bit.
So where we're coming out is the council supports items 1 through 4, which is the Mercury, 4 being the Mercury switch, and also the council is supportive of Suzanne looking into the just cause eviction piece and seeing what realistically we can do for this next session. that would improve the current situation where there's no need, there's no necessity for a property owner to justify evictions at all. Okay, are we clear? Everybody okay on that? All right, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.